See this pen right here? This pen is an interesting example. It's the same thing. So this pen is very inexpensive, but it writes well. I like it. But I can't have the pen the way it was. You know what it is. I don't want to give too much publicity, but they do treat me well, Sharpie. So I came here, they have $1,000 pens. And you know, you hand pens out, you're signing and you hand them out, you're handing them to all these people. Sometimes you have 30, 40 people. And they were $1,000 a piece. Beautiful pen, ballpoint. 1,000, it was gold, silver, gorgeous. But I'm handing out to kids that don't even know what they're doing. What is this, Mommy?
The U.S. has announced a formal blockade of Iranian ports and coastal areas. This is illegal action. All vessels are advised to immediately return to port if leaving and discontinue transit to Iran if that is your next port of call. Do not attempt to breach the blockade. Vessels will be boarded for interdiction and seizure transiting to or from an Iranian port. Turn around and prepare to be boarded. If you do not comply with this blockade, we will use force. The whole of the United States Navy is ready to force compliance. Now.
Okay, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Land Commander Gulf War III update. It's actually April 17th. I know the screen floating above me says the 14th. I had started working on this on the 14th. And then I actually tried to record it last night, did a whole 40+ minute video and hadn't hit record. You know, such is life, these things happen. And then in addition to that, you know, life is kind of like transiting the Strait of Hormuz. Like, you just don't know if there's a naval mine you're about to hit full of emotional turmoil, and sometimes you hit them. So anyway, I do apologize I haven't been back sooner, but it's good to be back today. And as you can see, we're trying out something a little different. I've figured out how to get the screen to just float up here, and we're gonna go through some overheads and we'll see how that works, but I think this might be a better way to do this moving forward. We'll see. The big exciting change since we last talked, you know, because every time we've gotten together since the kickoff of this conflict, the big theme has been, you know, you have 3 belligerents who are not on the same page, 2 of which are fighting one of the other ones, and that pretty much since day one, Iran has had effective control over the Strait of Hormuz. As of earlier this week, that has changed. As of Monday, in fact. As of Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, the Strait of Hormuz is no longer controlled by Iran. It's not controlled by the United States or the prevailing international order, rules-based order. It is, in fact, it is contested. The United States and Iran are now locked in a direct, very clear conflict to get the strait back open. And I mean, that's been the case since the beginning, but now we're really seeing the United States attempt to rebalance the power dynamic and attempt to get some actual leverage and begin to shift some of the perception around Iranian control of the strait. So it's contested. We're gonna take a minute and talk about how we got here, because a lot's happened since we last talked. I'm pretty sure when we last talked, what had happened is Iran had announced that they had placed mines in the strait. As I said when we last got together, I suspect that the Iranians did not actually put mines out into the strait. And just to be clear, where they claim to have put them were really technically in international and Omani waters. You'll see this little box here. Everything north, which is Iranian territorial waters, they didn't supposedly mine. I don't think they actually mined the strait. Putting out naval mines, marine mines is just as problematic as putting out land mines because they're indiscriminate. So they could hit your ship, they could hit an enemy ship, they could hit a neutral ship. They can be hard to find when the conflict is over, to get them back out of the ocean, just like actual landmines. So deploying them is very risky no matter who you are. So I think what Iran did is just said they put them out there just to freak everybody out. And that's good enough. As long as the perception is the strait is mined and dangerous, ships aren't gonna flow. So that's pretty good thinking on their part to continue to exercise control. So they had announced that. In the backdrop to that, a ceasefire had kicked in between the United States and Iran, and that ceasefire is set to expire on the 22nd. Initially, Israel didn't seem to be participating. I mean, they weren't involved in any of the talks, and they were seemingly doing their own thing, but pretty quickly, the 3 main belligerents stopped fighting each other, Iran hasn't been striking out at Gulf countries, GCC countries or U.S. forces in the region. U.S. forces have not been striking to Iran. Israel and Iran haven't been going back and forth. And that seems to be holding for the time being. As we'll see in a minute, just as I predicted, everybody's been using this ceasefire opportunity as a chance to rearm and regroup, which is absolutely what any smart commander, military would do if they were engaged in prolonged high-tempo operations. You need to give your forces a rest, rotate forces in and out, bring in new airframes, et cetera, et cetera. So ceasefire kicks in. Then talks are announced in Pakistan. You can see here's the delegation arriving in Pakistan on the bottom of the Iranians. Up top you have the Americans. It was a 21-hour meeting. Right before the meeting, though, the United States decided to conduct a freedom of navigation operation, a FONOP. FONOPs are a critical tool that is used and has been used for a very long time to actively enforce and maintain, to actively enforce the rules-based order that ships on the open oceans are free to transit them without succumbing to individual nations' rules, whims, et cetera, et cetera. A ship can sail across the Pacific and not be subject to dozens of different nations' rules. It is free, open transit. And one of the ways that's maintained is FONOPs. So if you have a stretch of water, of ocean that is technically international waters. This happens in the South China Sea a lot. There's a lot of small islands out there, the Spratlys, the Parcels, and they're all claimed by different countries. China claims them, the Philippines claims them, Vietnam claims them, and in many cases, these are tiny, just little specks of dirt out in the ocean, but if they're yours, then you get territorial waters. So everybody's contesting them, and a lot of them cross over through international waters. So to maintain the perception that these waters are open, the United States Navy will routinely sail a warship through contested waters that are legally international but are being claimed by other nations. It will sail a warship through there to demonstrate that ships can sail through there. And it's a critical tool maintaining the open access to the oceans. It reassures other nations, it reassures mariners, it reassures insurance companies, it reminds potential adversaries or those who wish to undermine the rules-based order that the United States Navy is there, it is watching, and it is willing and prepared to enforce the rules. And that is, not been a perfect solution to all problems, but it's done a pretty good job of maintaining the status quo out on the high seas. So they did this right before the meeting in Pakistan kicked off. And for some people, it was seen as very provocative. Others thought as a valid move. I think it was a good decision, right? If we're gonna shift the perception that the Strait is open, that it's under US protection and the rules-based order, then you've gotta move ships through there. If the United States Navy isn't willing to sail through the Strait with its expensive warships and sophisticated damage control systems and procedures and defensive weaponry and all of that, what tanker, unarmed tanker is gonna sail through there loaded up with crude oil, right? So what they did is 2 destroyers sailed from the Omani Sea, the Gulf of Oman, they sailed from over here, up along the international zone, came out into the Persian Gulf, and then one of them, I believe it was the Michael Murphy, the USS Michael Murphy, kicked on its AIS transponder, that's automatic identification system. There are transponders on ships that broadcast location, speed, et cetera, et cetera. It's how we get those cool maps that show all the ships all over the world. By doing that, it let the world know that it had successfully transited through the Strait, unencumbered, undamaged, and then with its AIS in, it transited back out into the Gulf of Oman. That is a successful demonstration by the United States Navy of free passage through an international waterway. That is a successful FONOP. And I think that was a good move going into those negotiations. I think it's been a bad move that we haven't done any more of them since, because you do it once and then you never go again. It seems like the to me, the perception is, well, yeah, you're still pretty scared of going in there. Why would I move my ship in and out? So the phone op occurs, the talks kick off, goes on for 21 hours, no agreement is made. This is not a surprise to me. Often in peace negotiations, just in a general sense, there's often a lot of these fits and starts. You'll have, temporary ceasefires that'll come and go, and then you'll have all these negotiations that'll come, and everybody will get together, and then they won't work. It's tough to get committed warring parties who are bleeding, literally, to sit down and come to an agreement. It's very hard. So when and if there ever is a true negotiated settlement to this, it will probably be after multiple rounds of negotiations that all seem to have the potential, at least according to the way, the administration might talk about it, to fix this. There will probably be, ceasefires that come and go, but it's no surprise to me that the talks broke down. So that happens, and then I believe that was on Saturday. So then that gets us to Sunday. And that's when Trump decides he's going to announce that the United States Navy is going to be commencing a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. And because it's Trump, he does this on X, and the way he makes it sound is that the United States Navy is going to just shut down the Omani Gulf side of the Strait to all traffic. No ships are moving. Doesn't matter who it is. Doesn't matter if it's Iranian. Doesn't matter if it's a American flagged vessel, a British flagged vessel. It doesn't matter. No ships are going to move. Which would have been pretty counterproductive, right? If we want to get ships to follow our rules, not the Iranians, but we just say nobody can move, that's not helpful. CENTCOM, U.S. Central Command, later clarified things and made it clear that the blockade and the interdiction of shipping would be targeted at Iranian vessels that had paid the $2 million toll to go through the Iranian toll booth, or vessels coming out of Iranian ports or going to Iranian ports. Any other vessel, according to the United States Navy, would be allowed to come and go. So that was announced on Sunday, and it kicked into effect Monday morning at 11 a.m. And since then, very few ships have moved through the Strait. Both sides claim the Strait is open. The Iranians claim it's open. We claim it's open. Both sides claim ships have come through. The Iranians claim that several ships made it through the blockade. There were some ships also just early on that the United States Navy let leave because they had already been granted prior permission. So there were some ships that got through, I think particularly going to China, that made it out even though the blockade was imposed. By all accounts, though, it doesn't seem to really matter what the United States Navy or CENTCOM is saying or what the Iranians are saying. It looks like, based upon the best data that open source intelligence can put together, that a handful of ships each day have moved through the Strait, both directions, going into the Gulf and leaving, but that traffic is basically at a trickle. It does appear the United States Navy is committed to chasing down Iranian tankers and ships coming out of Iranian ports all over the globe. All of which is a good idea, and all of which is exactly the kind of thing I talked about weeks ago being what I thought we were going to do and what we should do. I've been reading reports that say that, since the kickoff of the war, the Iranians are bringing in more money per day in oil revenues than they were before the war. Because we had just been letting Iranian tankers just come and go. And because the Iranians weren't going to shoot their own tankers, they were able to just come and go. So yeah, now we're cutting off that critical source of revenue. But we're also doing it at a time when many nations, the Philippines, Japan, Australia, are already hitting critical levels of fuel, fertilizers, helium, other products that come out of the Gulf, right? Not to mention the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, all of them, well, they are getting some oil out, particularly through the Saudi East-West pipeline that goes to the Red Sea that we've talked about. They're, losing tremendous daily revenue, right? Their economies are taking huge hits. So yes, this is a good idea and what we need to do. We need to interdict Iranian shipping that is flowing and make it clear that those ships cannot move. Only ships following the rules-based order can. But we really needed to have done it before everything got to a crisis for everybody. But we're here. The other thing that I haven't seen the evidence of is us moving forces to reinforce Gulf country, GCC coastlines or islands like we've talked about. I don't know if that's coming. I do appreciate that putting forces on those islands makes them vulnerable. But again, if this is all about a perception thing, the perception that the Strait is open under the status quo rules that have been around for a long time, you've got to do things that make people feel safe, make it seem like you're willing, the big bad American military, if they're not willing to operate in the Gulf, Persian Gulf and around the Strait, nobody is. So I don't know if we're going to see that happen. We haven't yet. But we're going to keep an eye on that. But for the moment, we are interdicting shipping. And what's been interesting is that despite the blockade coming in on both sides and all the rhetoric, Iran, Israel, and the United States have all left each other alone for the time being. Now, the Israelis have definitely kept going hard in Lebanon. In fact, the day the ceasefire was announced, I think we talked about this, the Israelis unleashed destroyed 180 targets in Lebanon in 5 minutes or something. It's just a massive amount of destruction rained down. And the ground invasion has continued, and the fighting with Hezbollah in southern Lebanon has continued. And by all accounts, the Israelis are dead set on clearing out that section of territory between their existing border and the Litani River in the southern part of Lebanon, and establishing a permanent Israeli militarized buffer zone. There's no evidence that they're not interested in doing that and that they're not going to keep going for that. There was a ceasefire that was negotiated that just came into effect, I think it was yesterday or the day before, between Lebanon and Israel. These were the first talks that Israel and Lebanon had held since '92. And while it is, I guess, promising there was a ceasefire, there's a key caveat to that. Israel isn't technically fighting Lebanon. I mean, they are bombing Lebanese targets, but the real fight is between Hezbollah and Israel. Hezbollah is not the Lebanese government. The Lebanese government is not Hezbollah. They don't control each other. They're separate entities. So once again, you have a scenario where you have two belligerents who are fighting, but one of those belligerents went and negotiated a ceasefire with somebody else. And while it does seem that the Israelis are holding off on striking, airstrikes throughout Lebanon at the moment and long-range fires at the moment, they've made no indication that they're going to pull their ground forces back. And it does seem that they're continuing to flow forces into southern Lebanon and continuing to conduct kinetic strikes throughout southern Lebanon. And yeah, they're not bombing Beirut right now, but they're still fighting. So by all accounts, the Northwest salient is still raging. I think the Israelis have absolutely taken this opportunity with the ceasefire with Iran to both put more focus into Lebanon, in southern Lebanon, and fighting Hezbollah, and also, just like the United States, just like the Gulf countries, and just like Iran, taking this opportunity to rearm and regroup and prepare for the next round of fighting. So, Strait is contested. We have two ceasefires in effect. One of them seems to be more or less holding. The other one is kind of, maybe you're not bombing Beirut, but you're still just blowing stuff up in southern Lebanon. And as I've noted, and as I predicted, everybody is rearming and regrouping. And this is what you do, right? I mean, no military can fight indefinitely. Every military needs the opportunity, even if you can't completely stop fighting, to slow down, to have an operational pause, right? Even if you don't have a full-on ceasefire, an operational pause. This happened in the 2003 invasion of Iraq. And it was something that was imposed by nature, actually. Partway through the ground invasion, as U.S. forces were heading towards Baghdad, a major dust storm came in and just shut down combat operations. The United States military ground forces just came to a stop and hunkered down. And what that did is it gave the United States military 3 days to both conduct punishing airstrikes, because we had the ability through synthetic aperture radar to look through the clouds and actually see Iraqi targets and hit them with precision munitions, but also take the opportunity to rush supplies, equipment, material to frontline forces who were hunkered down in the dust storm, so that they would be ready to go, or as ready to go as they could be, when the dust cleared and they could, get going again. So that's an example of nature imposing an operational pause. This ceasefire has given everybody an operational pause. And while it is more opaque what exactly the Iranians are doing and how much is flowing into them, and it's kind of opaque what the Israelis are up to, what the United States is up to is not perfectly clear, but it's much more clear. And the reason is you can just look here. This is flight tracking data, an aggregate of it over a 7-day period during the ceasefire, and you can just see 521 C-17 strategic, Globemaster C-17s are big strategic airlifters. They're not the biggest the United States possesses, but they're very large, and they can operate from a wide range of airfields, et cetera, et cetera. They're the backbone of the U.S.'s ability to move men and material via the air. This is an incredible amount of flights, and they're basically all just flowing, from the United States through Europe into the Middle East. A lot are going into Israel, so that definitely shows that the United States is rearming Israel, resupplying Israel. There's also U.S. facilities in Israel that are likely getting rearmed and rearmed. And then there's also likely supplies and equipment that are being offloaded in Israel and then flowed out to forward deployed forces in the Gulf. This is also not a complete picture, right? There are definitely assets that have been moved in that we have no idea about or that they didn't have their transponders on. But this tells you that a lot of men and material have been moving into theater, rotating forces out, getting ready for the next round of fighting. That's true of the United States, that's true of Israel. And some of the best evidence we have of what the Iranians are up to is there's all these satellite photos that are coming out showing the Iranians going out to facilities, bunkers, mountain complexes that we had bombed, going out to those and digging out the entrances and going in there to look for usable equipment, usable weaponry. Because there's a very good chance that the United States and Israel were able to destroy access to a number of facilities, but didn't actually destroy them. So there is likely a lot of equipment sitting underground that if the Iranians can just dig it out is perfectly usable. There's also probably a lot of equipment they've stashed around over the last number of decades that they are now breaking out. We don't know the exact amounts, but I know that's going on. We know the Russians have been shipping supplies to the Iranians via the Caspian Sea, particularly their plussed up Shahed drones that they've been manufacturing under license from Iran. There's evidence, of course, that the Chinese have flowed some weaponry into Iran. I do think that's probably true. I will say, though, there are these reports I've seen that do come with pictures of Chinese strategic airlifters landing in broad daylight in Iran to offload weaponry. Those are not real pictures. I mean, they might be real pictures, but those are not real pictures from that event. I mean, that's just not what the Chinese are doing. It would be so overt and so out of character for them to start flying in strategic airlifters in broad daylight like that. That's just not what they're doing. There's probably some weaponry being floated, or had been, things like man-pads, man-portable air defense systems. Things like Stinger missiles, you can put it on your shoulder and blow up an aircraft. But the idea that the Chinese are flowing massive amounts of equipment or about to, I think is very far-fetched. Sharing intelligence, definitely. Same with the Russians. All this is to say, the 22nd is coming. Pakistan is trying to get another round of talks going before then. And everybody's getting ready to go at it again. And my prediction just right now is that if the Pakistanis do get another round of talks before the 22nd, they will not succeed. That the ceasefire will come, deadline will come, it will end, there will be a resumption of both posturing and kinetic operations. And I imagine within a week, there will be another ceasefire and there will be another round of talks in Pakistan. That I don't think will go very far, but that's my guess. I think we're gonna have maybe, I'm gonna say 5 to 10 days of kinetic operations after the 22nd, followed by another round of ceasefires and talks. And in the meantime, the Strait is going to remain in this contested state with a trickle of ships coming in and out, so the whole global crisis will just continue to grind on, with no end in sight. So as you can see, April 22nd is coming, And I thought this would be a good opportunity also to discuss, the naval forces that have been brought into theater and are coming into theater. And the one I really want to highlight, or the two, is, we already know we've got, the Lincoln Carrier Strike Group down here on station. They've been there a long time. Tripoli, which arrived several weeks ago, its amphibious ready group on station. The Boxer amphibious ready group is transiting through the Pacific. The 4 Carrier Strike Group, which, after going to Soda Bay for repairs, I had really thought was going to come home because it's coming up on a year they've been out. Nope, they are not coming home. They are going to stay put out here in the Eastern Mediterranean to, participate in this war. The Relief Strike Group, the George H.W. Bush Carrier Strike Group, which left Virginia last week, which I thought was going to come relieve the Ford, is in fact, it's not actually right here at this point. It's somewhere down here off the coast of Africa. That Carrier Strike Group is sailing all the way around Africa to come up here and join the Lincoln and the Tripoli. So pretty soon here, we're going to have 3 entire Carrier Strike Groups on station and 2 amphibious ready groups on station. That's a lot of concentrated American naval power in theater. And, I hope this also is kind of on a different note. I hope this also kind of helps you appreciate the idea of thirds, right? So, whatever number of ships you have, as I've talked about, like the United States Navy has 300 ships total in its battle force. Only about a third of those, about 100, are really available at any time to go do missions that you might need them to do. So the United States has 11 aircraft carriers, right? With that, we're able to get 3 out into the ocean, 3, over here, in port. Could be pushed forward in a real pinch, but are there likely undergoing repairs and things like that. And then you have 4 that are completely laid up in deep maintenance, right? So with 11 super carriers, the United States is able to field basically 3 of them at any given time. With some effort, you could get a couple of the ones that are in blue out into the water, but it would take time and it would be very hard on the ships and their crews. So there's a lot of firepower being brought down here. A huge percentage of U.S. naval capacity has been brought down into this region. And over here, this came out the other day in USA Today. This is what we're feeding our sailors. This is what they're eating on the 3 super carriers, the nuclear-powered super carriers of the United States Navy. On board the Tripoli, the America-class amphibious assault ship. This is what they're eating. This is what they're fucking eating. We've got people who have been on a super carrier for almost a year, have conducted operations all over the globe, and this is what we're feeding them? This is what we think our men and women are going to chow down on and then be ready to go and kick ass? This is what we're spending $1 trillion a year to get? I mean, look, I'm not the kind of guy who's like, we shouldn't spend all that much on the military. That's not who I am. I'm into big defense budgets, but if we're gonna spend a lot of money, like, come on, really? You can't do better than that? It's shameful. It's disgraceful. And particularly in a conflict that was at a time and place of our choosing, wasn't the result of some attack on us that we had to respond to. The fact that we couldn't even make it sure that the Ford could come home and we could get a replacement carrier out there ahead of time, that we can't even get them better food than this, is disgraceful. And you know what? I've been thinking about this a lot. I don't know. Nobody seems to have been calling for this, but I think we really do need to start calling for the impeachment and removal of Secretary Hegseth. He is an embarrassment. He is incompetent. He does not know what he is doing. He is whiny. He is insecure. He makes us look weak and pathetic. And if I was serving the United States military right now, I would be ashamed of my uniform. So Hegseth needs to go. And you know what? If the Democrats would get it together, they could start making some real noise on this. And I think it's the kind of thing that would play well because, yeah, he's got to go. He's an embarrassment. He doesn't know what he's doing, and this is unacceptable. So You know, if anybody in politics is watching, you know, you might want to start making some noise about this, because I think this could be a way to really galvanize some momentum to, you know, if you're a Democrat, maybe win some seats in the fall. But more to the point, I don't know, maybe remind the men and women on these ships that we do care about them, that their leaders who are incompetent will be held accountable. I don't know. Probably that's not going to happen. But I'm ready to see this guy go. You know, this guy is not Donald Rumsfeld, who, while you might not agree with, you could at least respect and was at least competent. Okay. Anyway, the 22nd is coming. More carriers are coming. This conflict is not ending anytime soon. And on that note, we're gonna wrap up with just a little talk about China. I do want to do like a real video about China and Taiwan and the Indo-Pacific, but we're gonna just touch on China a little bit here because, of course, they are the other big global power. They are our pacing adversary in Pentagon-Lees. And as we've discussed, you know, the Iranians have been receiving intelligence from the Chinese. The Chinese buy a ton of oil from the Iranians. And it just came out this week that apparently a Chinese manufacturer and operator of ISR satellites, imaging satellites, apparently put one up in orbit, and then while it was on orbit, actually did a very low, did a private party sale of the satellite, essentially, to the Iranians for about $38 million, which is pretty clever, right? Instead of doing the sale ahead of time where it would be more obvious, you get it up there and it's just another Chinese satellite doing its thing, and then you quietly transfer ownership and control to the Iranians, giving them a very powerful, very capable ISR asset up in the sky, which, combined with other intelligence that have flowed to them from the Russian Chinese, explains why they've been able to keep such a good eye on the Gulf states and the region more generally, and U.S. assets more generally. This could be a false report, but I'm inclined to believe it. And it's a very clever way for the Chinese to give the Iranians this kind of capability without making it super problematic. You know, private company selling something after it's already in orbit, very clever. So then you get to this next picture over here, okay? So you got Xi looking real smug, and you got this fake Economist article, never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake. Absolutely. And there's a lot that, from the Chinese perspective, this strategic blunder in the United States, or likely strategic blunder, is looking good for them, right? They're getting to bloody our nose. They're getting to look more stable and less. China doesn't look like the rogue nation it was kind of acting like in the South China Sea right now. Like, we're looking like the rogue nation doing this stuff. And so, one of the questions that I've heard asked is, well, why isn't China taking this opportunity to invade Taiwan? And invading Taiwan is a whole video into itself. But I think that, China's looking at this and seeing that the United States has gotten itself into a real stupid mess. I think they see this as potentially a big PR coup for them. But what it also has reminded the Chinese of, and I'm not saying they didn't already know this, the United States knew this, is that choke points matter. This is the Strait of Malacca. This is kind of like the Strait of Hormuz. Trillions of dollars of cargo flows through the strait every year. This is the Indian Ocean, this is the South China Sea, and a huge percentage of the Chinese oil, the oil that China burns, and the other products derived from hydrocarbons that China consumes, comes through the Strait of Malacca and goes up to China. Because China has almost no domestic oil production. They have to import everything. It's pretty much all coming from the Persian Gulf this way. So even before this war, U.S. military planning for a conflict with China over Taiwan, among many things, called for U.S. forces, submarines, distributed marines, using the distributed lethality that we've talked about, to go into places like the Strait of Malacca and shut them down to Chinese shipping, to cripple their ability to bring in critical fuel, right? And there's no war you're gonna fight without fuel, not to mention your domestic front is going to suffer greatly if you don't have fuel. The whole Chinese war machine could grind to a halt just with a large concentration of U.S. fast attack submarines, surface combatants, and Marines just wreaking havoc here in the Strait of Malacca. China knew that before, and China knows this even more now. And it's one of those things that, yeah, we're bogged down big time over here. I mean, like we just looked about, we've got 3 carrier strike groups over there, 2 amphibious ready groups, a bunch of U.S. Air Force assets on the ground, all kinds of ground forces and other personnel. But even with all of that tied up over there, if China wanted to make a move in Taiwan, the United States definitely possesses enough capability to go out and start making it very difficult for Chinese oil to flow in the South China Sea. So I think it misses a lot of nuance to look at this event and say that this is just a net positive for China, that this has done nothing but embolden China, right? China announced that when the blockade came in that they expected that Chinese vessels and Chinese contract vessels would be allowed to continue to transit through the strait, regardless of what port they had come in, regardless of what oil they were carrying. And there was some speculation the Chinese Navy would begin escorting their tankers and stuff through the strait. That is not going to happen. There's no evidence it's going to happen, and I'm just telling you right now, it's not gonna happen. It would be way too provocative at this juncture for the Chinese to do. And again, given their critical dependence on these choke points, if they go and start really poking the United States in the eye like that and challenging us, then they're very likely going to find out that their lack of domestic oil production is a real goddamn problem for them. So, in many ways, actually, this may force the Chinese to become very, behind the scenes, aggressive at trying to push the Iranians to make a deal. Because more than anything right now, China wants the oil to flow. Yeah, China wants to be the dominant power in the Pacific, wants to be at least on par with the United States in the international order, all that stuff. But it also needs oil today. It needs oil today for its factories, for its people, for its military, for all that stuff. It needs it now, and you can't just, say, well, there's no oil, so we'll just use solar panels, right? Chinese naval destroyers don't run on solar panels. They just don't. You can't make the plastics for your electric cars without oil, right? There's all these things, the fertilizer problem, right? Helium, all these things that are coming out of the Gulf that the Chinese depend on, they know that. And I think that this conflict has reminded them of their vulnerability and probably both emboldened them in some ways, but also made them more cautious and concerned. And I really do think that this is going to make them have to consider putting more and more pressure behind the scenes on Iran. Whether or not that gets the situation resolved is yet to be seen. And I think there's a very distinct possibility that we're looking at multiple years of the Strait existing in a kind of nebulous state where control of it kind of ebbs and flows back and forth, and there's various agreements that sort of come and go to try to fix this situation. That's kind of where I think this is headed. I could be wrong. But what I'm not wrong about is that this war is not over anytime soon. And, I really do think that we're going to see more kinetic operations. So the last thing I just wanted to take a minute is just, we're getting a better sense of the scope of U.S. military hardware that's been lost and destroyed during this war. And, as of April 9th, this is a list of all the airframes that have been lost and damaged. And here, this picture is of one of the KC-135 Strato tankers, one of the aerial refuelers we've talked about, that was damaged in the Iranian strike on the Saudi airbase. Look at all of those shrapnel wounds. Everyone, you can't see it the best, I apologize, but every one of those little silver spots is a shrapnel wound that had to be buttoned up. So, even this, helps explain why the operational pause by the ceasefire has been so important. Having 8 refuelers out of the fight is a lot of refuelers. And these refuelers are old. I think the last KC-135 was made in the 1970s. So all of this stuff needs time in depots, in maintenance depots. All these crews need time. All these systems need maintenance. All these munitions need to be replaced. But yeah, we've burned through a lot of hardware, we've burned through a lot of munition, and this is just aircraft, right? We're not even talking about all the other stuff that's been blown up, all the radar sites that have been blown up at, say, like 5th Fleet headquarters, all the THAAD missile batteries in radars that have been blown up. I mean, a THAAD battery, as I think I've explained, is about $1 billion a pop. Just the radar on them is 300 million, and we've lost 3 of them so far. And as more satellite footage comes out, there's been a lot of satellite footage by commercial providers that's been delayed during this war, but as that's coming out, we're seeing more and more and more of the scope of devastation and destruction that the Iranians have rained down across the Gulf nations, but on US facilities especially. So I don't think we're done losing equipment and aircraft and all that, and we probably are gonna lose more personnel. Because everybody's getting ready to go at it again. And just the way that they're talking at the Pentagon, you know, tells me that, yeah, we're gonna just unleash again. We'll see where this all goes, but I don't think it's ending anytime soon. And the final thing I just really want to emphasize here is that really what's at risk with this war right now isn't just higher fuel prices, isn't just fuel crises or food crises or any of that. Those are all super important and problematic and absolutely are going to kill people. You know, people will die because of these shortages and are dying. But what's at stake in a longer term sense is that every one of these choke points, these aren't just all of them, these are some of the major ones. Panama Canal, Bab el-Mandeb, Strait of Malacca, you know, the Taiwanese, you know, the strait between the Taiwan Strait, the Strait of Gibraltar, all of those. All of these have been governed by, you know, the rules-based international order that allows ships to transit through these waterways unencumbered and free from the, you know, whims of various nations and changing political ideas and winds in different nations and all of that. If the Strait of Hormuz is not brought back under clear, decisive, US-led, rules-based control, if it is left in Iranian hands or remains in this ambiguous state, then every one of these choke points is now up for grabs. And it's not hard to imagine a scenario where Singapore, for instance, Singapore's down over here off the Strait of Malacca, decides, you know what, we're gonna start charging $2 million a ship to come through the Strait of Malacca. The Panama Canal is a little different, I should say, because the Panama Canal is technically a man-made waterway. So under international law, that's considered something that a nation controls, has to maintain, build, etc., and thus can charge tolls and establish rules and procedures of their own for the movement of ships through them. Same with the Suez Canal. But things like, oh, you know, the strait between Cuba and Mexico, right? Which, you know, kind of explains why Trump's been so interested in Cuba, right? That's another major choke point. And, you know, there's a lot of shipping that comes up between that strait and heads into the Gulf of Mexico and up into Texas and Louisiana to load up on all kinds of stuff, head back out. Anyway, if we can't get this back under control, all of these things are at risk. And the world will be a very different place if that occurs. The world, as imperfect and problematic as it is a better place when ships and mariners can cross the oceans freely and without fear. I mean, fear of nations doing stupid things. I mean, there's plenty to be afraid of out in the ocean. Crossing the open ocean is kind of insane if you really actually get into it. So many, it's just so easy to die out of the open. So easy for ships to just fucking sink. But that's besides the point. The point is, all of this is at risk. The world is better off having a rules-based order that allows ships and mariners to move across it freely. And if we don't get this fucking mess under control, if we don't get the strait back under our control, all of this is at risk. Okay, guys. Hope you've enjoyed this. I know I have. I hope this new format is a little better. I'm gonna keep dialing it in, but I think this is pretty good. I think this might actually be the ticket moving forward. I'm hoping to get some more videos out at a little quicker cadence moving forward. We'll see. And I also have some longer form videos about, you know, like China and Taiwan and some other issues that I'd really like to dig into that aren't just about Gulf War III that I'm working on, that hopefully in the next few weeks I'll start to get a couple of those out. Anyway, thanks for joining me today for the Land Commander Gulf War 3 update for April 17th. I hope you've enjoyed this. The Strait's up for grabs at the moment. It's contested. April 22nd is the deadline on the ceasefire. Everybody's rearming, so I think the spiciness is about to pop back up real hard. All right, y'all. As always, reach for the lasers, embrace those lights, and I'll see you next time.